Welcome to the All Hoops podcast. I'm your host, Steve Inman. I'm joined by my star producer and co-host, Chris Brito. Down the stretch of the NBA regular season we go. We're going to talk about the surging Knicks, the LeBron-less Lakers, and which team has the most on the line this postseason. Before we get to all that, Chris, my friend, how are you?
Hey, buddy, how can you not be happy with the New York Knicks right now? The Knicks have been playing like one of the best teams in the NBA, and quite frankly, I never thought this day would come. I mean, where do we start with this Knicks team, Steve? Do you think it's about intensity? Do you think about all the getting the right pieces? Thibodeau finally being able to like unlock this team the way he's always wanted it to be? What would you Besides, obviously, Jalen's playing incredible. Julius Randle's hitting is playing very efficiently. Like, both of them are top two guns. But what do you credit the success to the Knicks right now?
To be honest, you're not going to expect this answer, but I think it's totally Julius Randle. I think just his emerging play over the last 2 months, where he went from borderline all-star, kind of turnover prone, to hitting way more shots, to being more decisive in terms of his passing, to just being an all-around better player. He has been the biggest difference. I mean, Chris, if you look at the numbers, he's been better this year than he was 2 years ago in the contract year. And so for this to I did not see this coming. I thought this was a contract that you were probably better off just dumping for nothing. And now he looks like a legit deserved all-star on this roster. And I'm really fascinated to see how his play continues. Does he continue this going into the postseason? And, 25 points a game, 46% from the floor. What I'm encouraged about, believe it or not, is that the three-point shooting isn't great. It's not that 41% from 2 years ago where
36,
it
I
looked like
think.
an outlier season.
Yeah.
Everything else is just like great passing, higher rebounding.
Hmm.
He's not shooting poorly from three. He's about league average, around 34, 35%. It's just, it looks real. It looks encouraging. This doesn't look like a hot streak to me. This looks like what he can do. And for that, with you have Brunson making shots, Randall making shots, and then you get a little glimmer from Barrett with 25, every other game. That's a pretty good big three going into the playoffs. It's not going to win you a championship. They're going to need more. We know that.
We don't
But
know that.
as of now, this doesn't look like an easy out in the first round, where is what I thought they were a month ago.
Okay. So, so you're done with your point, right?
I mean, they look great.
Yeah.
7-0.
So listen, I think the most interesting part about the Knicks right now is that they've really hung in there with every I want to say, like, I can't really think of any blowouts they've had this year. I think they've hung in with near virtually every team. They had the Bucks on the ropes. They had even the Clippers on the ropes. They lost against those guys, but they've virtually beat a lot of the teams that um in the NBA. They've beaten the Boston Celtics twice. That, when they play them, the Celtics had the best record in the NBA. They play them again in a few days. And I think the most encouraging aspect for me, aside from the things you mentioned, Julius and all that, it's just like the defensive intensity from some of the other players like Grimes, and I think one of the more underrated aspects is Quickly's defense. I think Quickly has been such an anchor for that bench. I remember with our buddy Sebs, we were talking about how the bench was like our biggest vulnerability. Now you could argue it's another strength that we have, because the onslaught of the Knicks offense just doesn't stop. You have Hart down there in the second unit. You have the other, sorry, Hartenstein also with that second unit, and then I don't know, those guys just make plays, and Obi obviously is playing well too. And like, it's just hard to be not to be encouraged by this team. I think the average age for this team is 28 years old. And I think we still have a lot of the young pieces that we're trying to decide what to do with. Um, it's just the the possibilities for me are just so positive for me. And I think um there was a lot of talk about why, like, at least with the national media, about why the Knicks didn't like go after Donovan Mitchell. If they were after Donovan Mitchell, they'd be even in a better place. But the key to this run has been our bench. I mean, obviously the individual aspects too, but like we would have been so gutted if we had traded for Donovan Mitchell. Who's to say that we'd be in the same place? Now, we didn't make the trade for Donovan Mitchell. We're currently fifth in the East, but we're circling the Cavaliers. We're a game and a half back. And for a team that was mocked so endlessly for the beginning of the season and much of the season, to be in this position, to be so close, to me is like a very encouraging aspect. And right now, I don't think any team in the NBA wants to face the Knicks or the Bucks right now. The Bucks have the longest winning streak. The Knicks have the second longest winning streak. And I just think that the Knicks are just have figured something out. And since they've gotten Hart from the Portland Trailblazers, we're 7-0. So a lot of great things happening, and I'm encouraged.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything you said was correct other than the Donovan Mitchell stuff. Obviously, if they could redo it, they would trade Barrett and Grimes and the picks for Donovan Mitchell. I mean,
Think so?
I think he's a number one option. I think you put him on this team. If you plug him in instead of Barrett on this team right now, we're not talking about can we be a tough team to play. We're talking about beyond the first round. We're talking about if they didn't make the second round minimum, it's a disappointment. And so obviously you want that. But to be on the positive side, this is the Knicks' second 7-game win streak of the year. They had an 8-game one in December. They look great. I mean, overall, they had a one little blip of a 5-game losing streak in late December. And then they had that OKC game where they gave 145 points basically very early in the season. We basically said, wasn't this supposed to be a good defensive team? And since then, they've been a pretty good defensive team. And they're hitting timely shots. They're playing defense. This is the kind of the way that Thibodeau wanted to build this team. And he has. He's done a decent job. And again, the credit goes to Brunson and Randall, who have been awesome. And if you can just get Barrett going, being a little more consistent, then all of a sudden, they, as you said, they go from a team that is, you don't want to play them, to a legit team that can move on a round or two in the playoffs. And that would be something we would talk about forever. Like you brought up in our group chat the other day, the 2012 Knicks, right? And comparing the roster that won 53 games to this roster. And like, even at the time, this team looks way better than that team. And so it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, but I'm encouraged. This looks like a team that's on its way up. It doesn't look like it's stuck in mediocrity like I thought probably 6 weeks ago. And yes, you mentioned the Cleveland one. That would be an awesome matchup. But I think also more importantly, they're 3.5 up on Miami now to avoid the play-in 7th. And if you can just guarantee yourself a playoff round without having to deal with the play-in and making, studying different matchups and playing multiple games before the playoffs, I think that would help them a lot.
Agreed. I'm with you there. And I think the best part about this team has been, that they can beat you in different ways also. Like they don't, like, they can have an off night from the three, but then they'll get to the free throw line. And I don't know. There are many heroes, I think, but obviously Jalen and Julius are the main guys there.
Yeah, for sure. Another team that's kind of relying on one or two guys is the Lakers. And Chris, they were finally starting to figure it out. They were 5-2 since the D'Angelo Russell trade. And then boom, they lose LeBron with a foot injury for at least 2 to 3 weeks. He's going to be reevaluated in mid-March. Chris, this doesn't sound good at all. They're 30-33. They're a game back from New Orleans for 10. If they can somehow get into that plan, then they have to basically win 2 games on the road to just make the playoffs, to then what? Get their doors blown off by Denver or, Phoenix. I don't know, Chris. I just don't see really where this is going. Do you see this group making the playoffs?
I think I do. I mean, we saw them last night beat we saw them Wednesday night beat OKC, although I don't know what OKC is doing with their time. Uh
They're tanking.
yeah, they're
They're
playing.
tanking.
Um
It's time. It's
it's
March.
it's it's complicated, but I do think the Lakers have a great chance. I think the Lakers roster as currently constructed is better than the Pelicans and better than um the Portland Trailblazers
And Utah.
and
Utah
Utah.
somehow is not falling off. Like they're a game under or something, but like it's time for them to get out of the way and go increase their lottery odds too.
Yeah, and ruin our bet.
Yeah, I mean, that is just unreal. What was that number 34?
31 or 30.
31? Oh, so we
30.
lost.
Yeah, we
Oh,
lost already.
what a crime that is. Just terrible. I mean,
Anyway, I
what are they
think
doing?
I really like what the Lakers did the other day when they played against the Mavericks. They were down what 29
27.
27 points and they came back, which obviously like say what you want about the Lakers, obviously, right? But I think this actually bodes the worst for the Mavericks.
I mean, that was
Who
terrible for Dallas. They had
like
Jason Kidd after the game basically saying our guys need to grow up and stop worrying about whistles and the officials. And to me, that was a clear shot at Luca, who is complaining on every call in every game. And that's not the friction you need right now.
we'll talk about a little bit more
Yeah.
about that stuff later on in our final thoughts, but man, like the Lakers look like that to me is a statement win in many regards. And I think that could be pivotal if they get their bodies healthy and like win a few of the games while LeBron and Anthony Davis are out. So I'm encouraged by the Lakers. I think they at least get the 10th seed.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to hold on and get that, move up and get that 10 seed unless LeBron doesn't get back in time. But as of now, it seems like, 3 years ago, if we said, hey, they're going to be a play-in tournament, you're a battle for 7, 8, 9, and 10, players would be like, who cares? Like,
Right.
why do we care about this? And it seems like LeBron is very determined to get into the playoffs. I think he finds an embarrassment not to make it. And if you notice around Lakerland, there's no one over there talking about a championship. They're not talking about how do we sneak in when like they're trying to sneak in and just make an appearance. And it's sad to see when LeBron went from chasing championships to this, where you're hoping he can come back in time to get a 10 seed. But that's where they are. And I think he will get back in time, and I think they will get that 10 seed. The competition around there is not great. We're going to talk about Portland in a little bit. They're not that great. Utah traded a bunch of guys, and now I don't think they even want to win this. OKC, same thing. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander now has, the annual ankle injury again, and COVID now, and we'll see if he even plays again this year. I'm not so sure. They've shut him down at the same time the last 2 years with a Dort and maybe Giddy and anybody else who knows how to score. So I just think there's too many. And then New Orleans doesn't have Zion, and we don't have any update on him. I think there's a better chance LeBron is playing in 3 weeks than Zion is, based on what we've heard. And so it seems like there's just
All
too
right.
many.
Isn't
What?
that bizarre? Like the whole Zion thing
It's
too.
it's very bizarre. And they've been doing this for multiple years now, where it seems like they're hiding information on him. And the I thought they were doing it just to sell more tickets, but no one really believes him right now that he's on his way back any day. And so if you're going to a Pelican game, you're not expecting him to play anytime soon. Of course, we're going to a game next month, and I don't know if I'm going to expect him to play in
I
that
think
game.
I think if in a month from now the Pelicans aren't in the playoff conversation, I don't think he's going to be in.
It's just like it's really, really hard to not be in the playoff conversation because there's 15 teams, 10 make it, 3 or 4 of them don't want to make it. So it's really hard to do that. But we're a little off topic there. We both think the Lakers are going to make the play, and we'll see if they can go further than that. I think they're probably going to lose in the play-in, but at least they'll get there. So we'll see. Let's get to our final thoughts right after this. All right, Chris, final thoughts. I'm really excited about this topic here. What team or player has the most on the line this playoffs? I know you have a couple. I have one, so I'll let you go one, and then I'll do mine, and then you do the other one.
Sure. I think at the top of the list for me are the Clippers. I think the Clippers I think when they launched the Kawhi Paul George experiment, they at least expected to win one championship. Yes, they went to the Western Conference Finals one time. Um, but I think this is going to be what year 4 of that experiment, and I think at what point do you say this is just not going to cut it? I mean, Kawhi's not getting any younger, neither is Paul George. They seem to be injured all the time. Like, at what point do you cut your losses and just say, like, okay, it's time to move on. Let's move on to the next project. I don't, because they've also
What does
traded a
cutting
lot.
your losses with this group look like?
Well, I think part of it would be trading someone like Kawhi, and I'm not saying it to the Knicks necessarily, but like Kawhi could be a piece that we could use that could get us over the hump. I'm not saying I want that. I'm just saying a team like the Knicks would make sense for someone like Kawhi. Paul
It's
George,
to me really hard to do that because if things don't work out in LA, it means we can't trust this guy to be healthy. We're bailing out on this. Why would another team think that, like, the Clippers, like, it seems like no one understands his medical situation, Kawhi's, but it seems like the Clippers understand it better than other teams. So all of a sudden, if it's like, hey, this guy hasn't played for us in 4 years, basically, we want to get 2 first-round picks and a young player for him, the team's going to be like, wait, why are you trying to do this? Weren't you trying to win a title? And so I
well,
think George, who has been healthier of the two, would be the one that you would probably trade
right. So
until Kawhi regains his value.
anyway, in regard to that, I think the Clippers have the most to lose because you're sort of like pushed onto crossroads where, like,
Yeah.
what do you do moving forward? Do you continue to experiment another year where you have two injured star players for another season, hope for the playoffs? Like, I don't know if this is the way to grow a fan base. I can't imagine any Clippers fan is excited by the way like this is going. Like, sure, it's better than not making the playoffs, but to go to to have an unstable season to only like maybe pull it off in the playoffs, that doesn't typically happen in the championship
No,
run.
right.
But
It's very
that's
unlikely this works out.
yeah. So anyway, that's one of my picks. I know you feel strongly about yours as well.
Yeah. Just real quick with the Clippers, I just looked it up. Kawhi has played 146 games in 4 years with the Clippers, and Paul George 180 games. He played 35 more. I thought he was like doubling Kawhi, and he hasn't really played at all either. But yeah, that's not my team. My team is going to be the Denver Nuggets, Nikola Jokic, and the Nuggets. Look, I and the media bash Russell Westbrook for putting up empty numbers, never winning anything. When does that happen to Nikola Jokic? We're talking about him for a third straight MVP. And if he goes out and loses in the first or second round again, when does it become he's not a playoff? You can't win a championship with him being your number one guy. And when do we get to that point? And I think, for the record, they're going to the finals. They're my pick. But if he doesn't and they underperform, it starts to become a conversation of, are these numbers a little hollow like Westbrook's were? And can you win with a big man, even if he's as spectacular as Joker? And to me, no team has more on the line than him, because if they lose in the first or second round this year, he's not going to be able to win another MVP in my book.
But you know what though? That's the beauty of being in a small market like Denver, especially on a season, especially during the like when it's not football season. Like, I think maybe I'm wrong about this, but like I feel like them just being successful is good enough.
I don't be well, and I that's why I wanted to say this topic is more player and team than just team, because we're talking about a guy in Joker who, if he keeps putting up these numbers and wins a championship, we're talking about him as a top 10 player of all time.
Yeah, the one
If he doesn't
thing,
win that championship, we're not gonna put him in anywhere close to that category. We're gonna say he put up a lot of empty numbers on a team that never went to a finals. And I think the conversation between those two is huge. That's a drastic thing. And I think this is his best team he's had there. Murray's finally healthy. Porter looks good. Aaron Gordon could have been an all-star. Reggie Jackson there as like your sixth man. Like, it's a pretty good group. And yeah, maybe we've talked about it. Maybe they could use a little more depth, but a lot of teams could use a little more depth. And for them, it's not really about even winning a championship. It's about being a championship contender, showing that you were one little break here and there could have won it, could have got to a finals. And to me, they got to at least get to a Western Conference finals this year. They have to.
I can see that. Like they might end up playing one of the easier teams that just barely makes it to the playoffs. I think a matchup that would be so great would be like if the Lakers get the 8th seed, they play the Nuggets. It'll be a rematch of the bubble Western. I think the bubble semi Western Conference Finals or the Western Conference Finals.
The Nuggets in that beat
No.
Utah, and then they beat the Clippers. Denver
No.
beat Utah, then the Clippers, and then they played the Lakers in the Western Conference final.
So they did make the Western Conference Finals.
Did they? Am I remembering this right? But the point is, he's got to do something. I think they got to get to the finals.
Okay, fine. I mean, I don't know. I think they need to make decisions definitely on that team's roster moving forward. Like, is Murray actually the number 2?
So
They
in
hope
like this run, they lost the Western Conference semifinals, then they lost the conference finals to that Laker team, then second round, then last year first round. So like, yes, they made a Western Conference finals, but they weren't really competitive in that series. And
did they get swept? Like,
I think they got swept.
Is it a 4-1 thing?
Might have been 4-1.
Okay. Anyway, point being, I see you. I hear you.
It was 4-1. So to
Yeah.
me, conference finals, you got to at least have a long drawn out series where it looks like you could have been in the finals. That's the expectation this year. I know I'm kind of nitpicking a little bit, but that's where they need to be. All right.
Okay.
Your next team.
Sure. The other team on my radar, the Portland Trailblazers for me. I think Portland is a team that is neither here nor there. I think right now they're 12th in the West. They played against the Lillard played against the Pelicans on Wednesday night, and they lost. So, point being, I love Lillard. I think Lillard's one of my favorite individual players in the NBA, but I don't see this team being anywhere close to making any sort of run. I don't know what it is. I think Lillard will go down as one of the best individual players that has stepped on the NBA court. To me, there's a lot of similarities and parallels to Carmelo Anthony, where this season will end up being that Portland's, at least Damian Lillard's 71-point game will be the highlight of the season, just like when Melo had his 62-point game. That was the highlight of one of the seasons where the Knicks just barely made the playoffs. So I think this is a very important year for Lillard and the Portland Trailblazers, because if this doesn't happen, then it's going to be his legacy season. I mean, he probably doesn't care, but I think if you're talking about him among the greats, I think that'll be an important part of the discussion. And my other team are the Mavericks. I think this could go poorly in so many different ways. And if the Mavericks don't make enough noise in the playoffs or just have a disappointing run, which right now they're 1-4 with Kyrie Irving, you could see the writing on the wall with that. Like, imagine if you're the Mavericks, like this is like year 3 or 4 where you've tried to pair Luka with a fellow like great player and you just haven't. And then you start to wonder whether Luka is in fact a guy capable of molding with somebody else. You've had a shooting big like Kristaps. You've had Christian Wood, hasn't worked out. He's on the roster, but it hasn't really worked out the way he'd wanted to. And now you have Kyrie Irving. And you let go Jalen Brunson, who you could argue was probably the best fit next to Luka. Yeah. And now you have Kyrie Irving, where it's obviously taking some time for them to really mold together. So I think the Mavericks are also at crossroads, because how do you build this roster moving forward? And I think that'll be the biggest question if this team disappoints.
I want to dive into the Portland one. I mean, I agree with Lillard. The Carmelo comp is perfect. We're going to look at him as a great scorer who put up some great moments. But at the end of the day, he didn't win that championship and didn't really ever look like he ever could win that championship on his own. Same as Carmelo. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you admire the loyalty, but at the same time, they failed him hard in the last few years and building a team around him. I mean, even when the moves work, like Jeremy Grant was a good pickup. He's helped them. He's efficient shooter, 20 points a game. What do you do with him? He's up for $100-something million contract extension. They have already offered it to him, the full max. And he said, I'm going to wait and see what is going on because I think he's not sure if he can win there. And if you're going to lose him for nothing, you can't really replace him because they're so hard against the cap because Lillard is worth every cent of that supermax. But at the same time, it's really, really hard to build a team around a supermax guy. I mean, he makes 42 million this year, 45 the year after that. Then you got 48, 58, and then a $63 million player option 4 years when he's 36. So, as you said, this is a crossroads for them. They need some kind of superhero Lillard moment, and they need Simons and Grant to take a leap, and they need Nurkic to look like he's not a stiff as the center, because I always underestimate the big man, but if you got a big man just clogging the paint who can't protect the rim, you're screwed. And and he's on a fresh 4-year deal. So I just think they've made too many mistakes for this to work out. And unfortunately, I think Lillard's career is not going to be wasted. It was obviously a great career, but I don't think he's ever going to get another chance at a championship.
I agree. Unless he gets traded, and I don't think
Unless he gets traded. All right, Chris, anything else before we wrap up the show?
No, just wanted to bring up Kevin Durant. He had his debut with the Suns. I think it's really fluid.
23 points.
I think it's gonna do wonders for Booker and Durant. Mostly because Durant will probably get the primary defender. Booker's gonna get the second best defender, and then Chris Paul is not gonna get the third best. So I think it's too early to say they're the team to beat, but right now, I think if they get all those things working at the same time, I think it'll be a fun end to the season to see what happens with the Suns.
That potential Suns Nuggets series will be incredible. I'm hoping for 7 games of that. I think that'll be good. Maybe I'm overestimating Denver. I think the way your face is showing me, maybe a little bit.
Maybe.
But that's going to do it for us here on the All Hoops podcast. Thank you for listening on whatever you get your podcast on. Thank you for watching on YouTube. We'll be back next week to talk about more NBA action.
Bye, everyone.